Hi, wow. You guys are ready to rumble, I can tell. Hi, everybody. Hello, good evening. My name is Kim Gorgons, and I am your host for the night. I'm also the executive director of the Center for Professional Development here, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. I wanted to open with a number of very special thank yous first. First, a thank you to the Chancellor, who I have a chance to introduce in just a moment, also the DU community, with a very special thank you to all of our sponsors. You'll see they're listed in our program. Also the Sturm family, and I think they are sitting somewhere right here. Thank you to the Sturm family for their vision and their support of this event. Also a thank you to our esteemed panelists, who I'll introduce to you momentarily. And a thank you to our volunteers in the event planning team. If you guys could give a wave. All right, nice job. It takes a village, and we've got some extraordinary villagers for sure. And perhaps most importantly, please join me in giving a very special thank you to our service members and veterans in the audience. Also, and at least as importantly, a thank you to their families. You guys, you are our village. I wanted to take a moment to introduce the Center for Professional Development. This is a collaboration I feel really proud of. This is a collaboration between the Graduate School of Professional Psychology, the Graduate School of Social Work, Morgridge College of Education, and University College. And our mission is to build the most robust interdisciplinary programming for our alumni and community members practicing in mental health, education, social work, and across the board, all applied health disciplines. We want to be the destination for all of your professional development and specialty training. That will include everything from webinars, lectures, workshops, short courses to certificate programming. And this is the kind of event that we're really committed to building, this kind of extraordinary opportunity to bring an audience together that would not otherwise have the chance to do that. Our 2016 calendar will launch in December. Someone can yell at me if I'm incorrect about that. The 2016 calendar will launch in December and will be updated all the time, so keep checking back. And please let me know if there are things that you want to do, see, or teach with us. We welcome you to come on board. I want to also point out that the Center's mission directly reflects the vision of our new Chancellor, Chancellor Rebecca Chop, and I am honored to introduce her to you now. As many of you know, Chancellor Chop has more than 20 years of experience in higher education leadership, most recently as president of Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. Any grads here? We're going to have to work on that. Before assuming the presidency of Swarthmore in 2009, she served as the president of Colgate University, dean of Yale Divinity School, and provost and executive vice president for academic affairs at Emory University. She's an acclaimed scholar and an astute observer of the changing structures and cultures in higher education. In fact, her book, Remaking College, was selected by Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society as one of their top 14 books of 2014. During her first year in Denver, she led a nationwide discussion among the greater DU community about how we can best recreate the educational process to equip our students to lead in the 21st century. Those discussions, coupled with the extraordinary work of many individuals on campus, have informed the university's new strategic plan, DU Impact 2025. Going off script for just a minute, if you haven't read it, you should, because it's brilliant. Okay, back on script, sorry. Chancellor Chop introduced the key elements of the strategic plan last month. During her historic inauguration celebration, the university community united in its support of the Chancellor and her vision during the momentous inauguration festivities. Since then, the excitement on campus continues to grow as together the DU community imagines and plans for the future of our university. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Chancellor Rebecca Chop.
Thank you, Kim, for that overly gracious and really too long introduction. It's my pleasure just to thank you for coming tonight and welcoming you here. Thank you for joining with us to discuss awareness of our military veterans, awareness in our community, awareness in our educational systems, awareness and discussion of future ways of support. And as far as I'm concerned, every day is a day we should honor the men and women who have served and who serve in our military. But of course, we're nearing Veterans Day, so we will officially kick off Veterans Day with a good discussion. I also want to thank the Sturm family. Let's see, we've got Dawn and Sue, and then we have Stephen Sturm and Emily, parents and 2 children who have been incredibly impactful on DU in so many ways. But I do want to lift up tonight the way they have personally got involved. And I want to say Emily and Stephen are on campus helping our School of Psychology, helping our law school with programs to serve our veterans and to serve those who are supporting our veterans. So thank you for your incredible support of DU, but also of our veteran programs. Thank you. And finally, just a note about Impact DU. You've already heard a lot about it, but I do want to talk about why, to me, the programs to support our veterans are so much a part of the nature of our university and the nature of serving the public good and our strategic plan. So DU wants very much to make sure that we are serving the full needs of our students. When vets come to us, when all of our students come to us, it is certainly about skills, it's certainly about training, but it's also addressing the full person, their heart, their relationships, their futures, how they think about themselves as professionals. So the strategic plan is really focused on that holistic student experience while they're at DU so they can be prepared for jobs after their degrees. We also, in this strategic plan, are building upon our long history of engaging with Denver. We are a source of knowledge, practical knowledge, professional knowledge, intellectual knowledge. We want it to serve the people of Denver. So thank you for coming tonight to honor our veterans, to help DU and to help the city of Denver and this area think about how better we can serve our veterans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chancellor. Really, on behalf of professionals here, students, alums, faculty, staff, all of the DU community, we're so grateful for your stewardship, also for your service to the community. It's, folks, watch this space. We are taking off. We're building an empire here under her direction. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our amazing panelists. You have in your program a bio, also an agency fact sheet. I'll also just point out that you also have a blank index card. That is your question card if you want to share in the discussion at the end. If we have time, I'll ask you to record a question, and if you can send it to the left. My students, let's see. There's Courtney, and we probably have Moses here somewhere. If you could send it all the way to the left and get a hand up, we'll make sure to pick those up and collect those. So without further ado, we have Dana Namila. Chief Rini Samard. The Honorable Judge Shakes. Colonel Michael Kint. And Mr. Izzy Abbas. So we'll spend the next 60 minutes running through some questions. We've asked the panelists to prepare some responses ahead of time. And then I'll introduce also my esteemed co-moderator, Ms. Sarah Stowell, who is a student at the Graduate School of Social Work here at the University of Denver. Welcome, Sarah. And finally, after the 60 minutes, Sarah is going to lead some impromptu discussion on 3 areas especially important to her, and also audience Q&A. So with that, our first discussion centers around the needs of military veterans, service personnel, and their families, and how those are being met by each of the community partners represented here. Judge Shakes, can you give us an overview of the landscape from your vantage point on the bench, and also some information about the Veterans Trauma Court?
Thank you. Before I address that question, I want to do 2 things. First of all, At this time of year, close to Veterans Day, we get a lot of folks that thank us for our service, and that verbal appreciation is appreciated. But what really is helpful are the people that walk the talk. And we've got two of those folks, institutions here tonight. The University of Denver and the Stern Family Foundation are walking the talk, and I thank you very much for that. The second thing I want to do before we start talking about my particular area, which are veterans involved in the criminal justice system, is recognize that most veterans come back. They don't have mental health issues. They're not involved in the criminal justice system. And they really do become the fabric of our civil society. They are our scout leaders, our coaches, our PTA presidents, our cookie moms, all those folks. So although we're going to start talking about a particular segment of the veteran population, don't forget that most return and really support our communities and our businesses. So the niche that I work with are veterans involved in the criminal justice system. And the need here is to have a criminal justice system that understands their predicament and provides them a way to rehabilitation and treatment, and ultimately provides them a second chance as far as either sealing their files or giving them a new lease on life. And why is that a problem? It's a problem in these two particular wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, because the burden of these wars have fallen on such a smaller part of our population. General Dempsey spoke at the first ever Veterans Court conference in D.C., and he said if you had told him as a staff officer in the Pentagon when the all-volunteer force was being developed that we could sustain with volunteers 2 long wars for over a decade, he would have said it would have been impossible. It has been possible, but it's been possible because we have a lot of young men and women that have had multiple deployments. We have 4 and 5 deployments of guys in our Veterans Trauma Court and women. I thought, having served a year in Iraq, that I'd have some credibility, and I find out I'm a lightweight because I only served 1 year in Iraq. And many of the guys in the program have had multiple tours. So that burden, multiple deployments, falling on a smaller segment of our population, and perhaps a population more predisposed to PTSD and the other things that we're talking about, has made this a greater issue than perhaps in prior wars. And what are those issues? What we see primarily in the Veterans Trauma Court is post-traumatic stress disorder, a traumatic brain injury, military sexual trauma, anxiety, depression, moral injury, and survivor's guilt. That's sort of the constellation of the issues mental health issues that we deal with in our court. And these issues, we now know, are a predictable result of sending young men and women into combat. We know from the Vietnam Veterans Longitudinal Study that when we send 100 young men and women into combat, we're going to have 4 or 5 of those that come back as a result of their combat experience with a mental health issue that's going to get them involved in the criminal justice system. And just some data, and we're lucky to have the long-term study from the Vietnam vets that shows us 3 things. Veterans with PTSD create criminal assaults 4 times greater than veterans who don't have PTSD. 47.5% of the veterans, Vietnam veterans, who had PTSD were subsequently arrested. And veterans with PTSD are 4 times more likely to assault their spouse or partner than Vietnam veterans that didn't have PTSD. So these are indications that the population that we deal with, veterans in the criminal justice system, are not failures, but they're a predictable result of sending young men and women to war. Now, how does that get to the criminal justice system? Well, the symptoms that we see with PTSD are re-experiencing, avoidance, and hyperarousal. Each one of those presents different problems for the criminal justice system. We don't see very much of the re-experiencing. And we do see some avoidance, but the big one that gets the men and women involved in the criminal justice system is the hyperarousal response. The response of, which would be appropriate in combat, an overwhelming response to a threat. That same threat, when somebody spills a drink on you in a bar, becomes an overwhelming response and severe injury to the person that spilled the drink. So that comes then to the criminal justice system in the form of DUIs, substance abuse, weapons charges, disorderly conducts, and domestic violence. So that's sort of the lay of the land. What are we doing about this? That's the need. What we've done throughout the country in a movement that started in 2008 is develop special courts for veterans. We've got 6 in Colorado. Colorado Springs is by far the largest and the oldest, but we also have veterans courts in Arapahoe Douglas, Adams County, Jefferson County, and a veterans track in the Denver Drug Court. And what all these courts do is take advantage of a fairly new trend in the law, which is therapeutic jurisprudence. And what I mean by therapeutic jurisprudence is using the power of the court to, first of all, identify what the underlying problem is. Why is this person in the criminal justice system? And then through the use of the court and marshaling the resources to address that underlying problem. With principles of behavior modification, using sanctions, which we're pretty good at the courthouse, and incentives, which we're not so good at, but you all know are really in the long term more effective. So these new types of courts, drug courts, veterans courts are based upon that drug court model, are all focused on early identification of the problem, and then monitoring treatment and progress through treatment and therapy to address the underlying problem. For us in Veterans Court, that's primarily post-traumatic stress, survivor's guilt, military sexual trauma, those things. Those types of things that I mentioned before. So what we do is we create in this court a military culture. By that I mean we pass out candy when things go well. The candy comes in a Army ammunition can. We have a hua button and an oorah button. It might seem trivial, but it's all a way of providing incentives, creating the military culture that these men and women have been successful in. When I first started in the Veterans Court after I came back from Iraq, it was about this time of the year. And I was at Costco and I was buying a lot of candy, and my wife said, we don't need that much Halloween candy. Why are you buying so much candy? And I said, I'm going to take it to Veterans Court and pass it out as incentives. And she said, are you kidding me? You're going to give combat-hardened veterans candy? And I said, well, yeah. I read about it someplace that it was a good idea. Well, it is a good idea. Those kinds of incentives, certificates, applause, all build on what you all know works best for getting people to change their behavior, and that's incentives. So we do that. Close coordination with the treatment providers. We have a great relationship with the Department of Veterans Affairs and their Veterans Justice Outreach officers that facilitate making appointments, report to us on how people are doing in treatment, meet our guys at the jail. And the early identification includes getting a report. I get a report every morning of every veteran in El Paso County that was booked into our jail. So we know immediately who's there. We can send our peer mentors out to meet them at the jail. We have our Veterans Justice Outreach officers there at the jail as well. So that's sort of a quick overview of what we've done in the legal system to change things, to develop a collaborative effort with our community partners, the treatment providers, Department of Veterans Affairs, the law enforcement, all to come to the table to focus on what does this veteran need to be successful, and what can we do to help them navigate through the various bureaucracies that they have to deal with. As you can imagine, patience with bureaucracy is not something that most of our guys have very much of. So, near-term challenges, emergency housing. When these folks get out of jail, there's often an issue of where are they going to go tonight? And we really try and avoid having veterans at the shelter or under a bridge. Intermediate term housing, there are great programs, but that immediate need, where are they going to be tonight before they have time to fill out forms and things like that is a need. Finding jobs for these guys. Over the 5 years that we've been keeping data, and we have a great partnership with the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs in the trauma clinic, 21% of our veterans in our program are surviving on $200 or less a month. Tough. So not just finding jobs, a lot of folks want to give veterans jobs, but finding the right jobs. By the right jobs, I mean jobs where the employers understand that in Veterans Court, for example, these guys are going to be gone at 16 to 21 appointments a month between coming to court either every week or every other week initially, their appointments at VA, the urinalysis testing that we do. We need an understanding employers that appreciate our guys being gone and the fact that they are involved in the criminal justice system, and many of them do have felony convictions. I would say the biggest unmet need is families. We have tried, but been relatively unsuccessful at this point in getting the families involved, both as force multipliers, and I'll explain that in a second, but also getting the families involved to help them understand what it's like to be with a dad or a mom that's suffering from PTSD or traumatic brain injury. By force multiplier, I mean having the families understand what's happening in therapy and treatment so they can build upon those principles at home. So working with the families is something that we haven't got there yet. We haven't broken the code on that particular one. Sustainment. I tell the folks on my team at least once a month, we need to do all the good work that we can right now. I don't know if the population in our country is going to be with us 10 years from now. Right now, everybody wants to help veterans. Okay. It's great to have that help institutionalized and solidified with relationships with the university and with the Stern Family Foundation. That really makes me hopeful that this isn't something, interest in vets, that's going to die in 2 or 3 years. Another challenge is we go out into the community with the treatment providers is having treatment providers that understand the military and understand that the military experience of our veterans is something that they can build on in treatment versus something to be avoided. So our domestic violence providers, our DUI providers, all these folks in the community that provide related resources and treatment for our guys really need to understand, I think, better what the military culture is all about and build on that. We couldn't make a Veterans Court without our peer mentors. Our peer mentors in Colorado Springs are mostly senior, retired, senior non-commissioned officers who really act as friends, get our guys to appointments, help them navigate through some of the bureaucracy at the VA and other places. And getting mentors that are committed long-term. A lot of the guys in the program feel they've been let down and go through a revolving door with treatment providers, so having peer mentors that are committed for the long term and understand in all of our Veterans Court programs that we focus on the high-risk, high-need people, which means being a mentor to one of these guys is not being a sponsor to an Air Force Academy cadet. These guys have challenges that have got them into the criminal justice system. Then the final thing I want to talk about is discharges. Our primary partner as far as treatment is the Department of Veterans Affairs. Unfortunately, at any given time, we've got about 10 or 15% of our guys that are not eligible or not immediately eligible for benefits through VA because of their discharges. They've gotten an other than honorable discharge, usually as a result of a pattern of minor misconduct after they've come back from combat. We see a lot of guys that do very well in combat and not so well at the garrison. So we have a population in need that not immediately entitled to benefits through VA, and working with them as the DU Law Clinic Veterans Law Clinic is starting to do to upgrade their discharges is very important. And possibly even a political comment here, to prevent them from getting those discharges in the first place. Perhaps a more understanding military that doesn't brand these guys with an other than honorable discharge and have them suffer the significant impact on their VA benefits. So that's sort of a quick, or maybe not so quick, overview of what veterans courts are doing. A great response to a system that's not very innovative. The legal system isn't particularly innovative, but in this regard, I'm happy about what we've done around the country, about 300 veterans courts now, and particularly in Colorado, we've made great progress here. So,
Judge Shakes, thank you. And I wouldn't be overstating it to say that every municipality in the country looks to your court really for innovation and to be its model for best practice. And please, everyone in the audience who is a veteran, consider being a peer mentor in the court. With that, Chief Simard, your perspective.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity here, Chancellor, Sturm family. Thank you for your support of veterans. Currently, my position is with the Aurora Chamber of Commerce, and I run their Defense Council, which is a military affairs committee, if you will. There are two of them in the state, one in Aurora, one in Colorado Springs. We have our primary focus, obviously, is Buckley Air Force Base. Colorado Springs has a few more bases down there that they need to be concerned about. But our main focus is on the families, mainly on the military. We support veterans also, too. But the 7,000 active duty Guard and Reserve that are actually stationed at Buckley or in and around Buckley. So that's what our focus is, and it's to take care of the troops and really to advocate and educate the community on what Buckley has to offer and what the military does, help them understand the culture of the military a little bit better. So we do that in a variety of ways through our Defense Council. The Defense Council, again, is about 350 members, community leaders and military leaders throughout the eastern metro area. We meet monthly at usually a different military unit. Most of them around Buckley, but they're off base also. And again, it is to create awareness, to educate the public on what's going on in the military, and then really to lobby them for support when we need that. And we do that in a variety of ways. One of the things the Defense Council has done is to support a deployed spouses and family dinner that Buckley does for all branches of the service. And for those that aren't familiar with Buckley, there's about 14,000 people that work on that base, all branches of the military to include the Coast Guard. So when individuals deploy, they have support for them through dinners, take them down to the zoo, they do all kinds of things. So we have, through some of our generous donors, provided support for that for a year for deployed spouses and their family members. Also donations over the holidays for the troops, especially the young folks that need a little extra help with food, so they help in that regard. We work in a private-public partnership with the folks at Buckley also, too, to help them improve efficiencies and reduce duplication. So if we can help them in the community, partner up with them so they don't have to spend as much money, we're able to do that also for them. And then we advocate and lobby also through our political representatives. Part of the Defense Council, where we do have representatives from all of our political representatives, both in the city and in the state, that attend that. So we do lobby for them to protect them, and those military folks in here will understand what we call BRAC, a base reduction in force, where there's a potential, and that happened here years ago, obviously, at Fitzsimmons, and it happened at Lowry, where we lost missions. So we want to protect those missions at Buckley. That's one of our main focus areas. And we do that through our legislators, and we also try to advocate to bring more missions into the base also. As far as veterans are concerned, we support them. One of the main things that we do is the Veterans Salute, for those that have heard of that in Aurora. It's a 21-year event. We just did it last week. We partnered with the Aurora Center for Active Adults, 800 attendees normally. We honored this year 102 World War II veterans. I think 90 showed up for that. It may be one of the last opportunities we get to do that in recognition of 70 years since the end of World War II, but we had 102 World War II veterans that were invited to that, and it was quite an event. I know Dana and Izzy were at that also too, and also the Colonel. So that's just some of the things we do in Aurora. And for those folks that don't and aren't aware of what goes on there at Buckley, I'm more than happy to take you out there and show you and invite you to a defense council, so please come and talk to me after we're through tonight.
Personal tours after the reception tonight. That's what I heard.
Yeah, well, it takes a little bit more coordination than that, but thanks, Kim.
Chief Smart, thank you. Ms. Niemela,
Yes, ma'am.
your perspective on the needs.
It's interesting, and I think that the best way for me to address this is probably to tell you a little story. And I'm not usually used to talking at crowds, which is what I feel like I'm doing right now because these lights are pretty intense. I like talking with people, but nonetheless, I'll assume that you're really, really engaged and dying to hear what I have to say. In 2005, I got out of the Navy. I went in 97. I got out in 2005. There was a little political realignment somewhere around September 11th of 2001. So I had my own unique experience with the global war on terror. So when I left the military, my sole mission was to just go find Dana and figure out who I was in the world, get a good job that was fun and a little less intense than maybe what I had experienced overseas or working at the Pentagon. And I found a fun job, and it was cool for me for a while. But ultimately, I found out that I was going through what a lot of people who leave the military go through, which was a lost sense of purpose and a real dissatisfaction with working in the civilian sector, if you will. This is not a bust on all civilians. It is not a bust on civilian employers. I'm just giving you my unique perspective. And that perspective was that I worked with a bunch of people who I didn't feel knew the values of teamwork and accountability. I didn't feel like anybody had my back in the company that I was working for. And I didn't really feel like I was fulfilling a greater sense of purpose for the community. And interestingly enough, as I was going through this change of heart and trying to find out who I was and what I wanted to do in the world, the first treatment court in Colorado Springs popped up. And I read an article in Westword about this court. And being the historian that I am, big picture thinker, not dates and facts, I'm terrible with it. Don't tell my alma mater because I don't remember anything that happened in history except the days I went into the military and the days I got out. May 30th, 1997 and May 31st, 2005. But what I get are big picture sentiments. And I thought, how are we starting these treatment courts in the 21st century for my peers? Haven't we learned this lesson already? Haven't we figured out that there's a formula to all of this? And shouldn't there be a way to stop it? So I started talking to a bunch of people, some of whom are in this room, and asking for advice on how do I have an impact on this, because I felt like I had some unique talents that could possibly lend itself to a solution. And I opted, look at, they're pointing at each other. They're like, it's your fault, she's up there. No, it's your fault. And I actually found out about the School of Social Work at DU and thought, that's what I want to learn. I want to learn how to be a systems advocate. I want to learn how to change policy to better impact these individuals. Because as I was speaking to some of the veterans who were going through these things, it felt like there were a lot of barriers, some intentional, some unintentional, to accessing key services. And one of the stories I heard in particular was of a veteran who had a PTSD episode and woke up in jail and didn't know how he got there. And I asked him if he had been getting treatment. And he said, well, I was for a while. Well, what happened? He goes, the funding for the program stopped. So I went from getting therapy twice a week, which I really needed, to now I get it about every 6 to 8 weeks, which isn't enough for me. And I thought, well, it's not enough for me either. And while I was working on my master's at DU, I found out about this little program that the city and county of Denver had at the time to help homeless veterans reintegrate into the workforce. And being the advocate for myself and others that I sort of networked myself into a position with the city and county of Denver, because I felt like this was an opportunity that I had to really address systems change and access to these crucial services. And at the time, I was like, I'm a vet, I served in the Navy, I can talk to other veterans, I know what the problems are, I know how to fix them. And what I learned was that I didn't know anything about the problems, and I didn't know anything about the solutions. Thankfully, over the course of the last several years, I've figured out what a lot of those things are. But what was surprising to me is that, and I'll speak specifically to the demographics of the Metro Denver area, because I think where you're providing services is very crucial to your level of knowledge of military culture and competency that you need to have. If you're working in Colorado Springs with Judge Shakes with active duty service members, you're going to need a level of competency that rises above what I might suggest for the city and county of Denver. Because the vast majority of individuals who are experiencing homelessness in the city and county of Denver are not post 9/11 veterans. They're actually those who have served since Vietnam and prior to the first Gulf War. The age difference is significant. Their veteran identity is very different. They haven't served in 20 or 30 years. So their relationship with other service members and with the VA are very different than what we see in today's generation of veterans. That's not to say we don't see folks who are 21 days out of service, young individuals, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. I think the youngest veteran I worked with was 21 years old, and he spent his days and nights riding the light rail here in Denver. So he would have a place to sleep. But the veteran identity itself wasn't the biggest factor for these individuals. The biggest factor was that they needed somebody who was going to do what they said they were going to do. They'd access all these services to help them with employment or to get out of homelessness, and people weren't responding the way they felt was necessary. And that's where we can kind of capitalize on that veteran identity a little bit, where we remember when we did serve and wear the uniform and say, hey, I got your back. I know that teamwork's important to you. I know that accountability is important to you. But the issues that they were facing, for the vast majority of the people we're serving here, had absolutely nothing to do with their time in service. Because one of the things that I think we often forget in this attempt to explore military culture is that before we put on a uniform, and even after we take it off, while we're wearing it, we're a human being first. And each of us has unique needs as a human being that are important. Your Maslow's hierarchy of needs of food and water and shelter, to be able to take care of your family. Those aren't unique just to veterans. They're unique to all of us as individuals. And so in dealing with the population that I was serving, I saw that the problem was much more complicated. And the solution, therefore, was much more complicated. It couldn't just be about getting a homeless individual a job. To your point, Judge Shakes, not just any job, but the right job to suit your lifestyle. Things needed to be customized. So I set out to change the rules a little bit. Being a policy advocate, I thought, well, who wrote the rules? Who do I have to talk to? How can I change that? And we've been able to develop a program in the city and county of Denver that provides a holistic solution to address people's needs. And I think what I'm most proud of with our team is that we work on an interdisciplinary team. We work in an interagency team. We work with other community providers, do a full biopsychosocial assessment when somebody walks in and let them identify what their priorities and needs are, and make sure then that we deliver on those promises made. If somebody's number one concern is finding housing. There's a few key places we're going to go first. We're going to go to the VA and their housing program. We're going to go to our partners at Volunteers of America right down the street here, and see what they can do to help leverage their assets that they have in the community to help get their housing stabilized. I have a team of vets and I have non-vets on my team. And I think that was a really important aspect for me to understand too as a service provider, that I didn't need to be a veteran to meet the needs of the people who were coming to me. What I needed to do was stop, listen, and respond. Work with what they were giving me or any other member of our team to make sure that their needs were understood and then deliver on that promise. And I think that's one of the things that unfortunately makes some providers very unique, but also makes us very successful in addressing those needs and gaps in services in the community. No matter what they present to us. Even my famous line from supply school was, you don't have to know everything, you just need to know where to find it. So I use my military skills in my current job. I don't know all the answers when somebody sits in front of me. My team knows that they don't have to know the answers either. But what they do need to know is that this community is ripe with people who want to help out. To give somebody the opportunity to make better of their lives so that we can build this safety net to prevent them from ever becoming a part of your court. The resources are there, so how do we make that connection? And it's by listening, understanding, and then delivering on the promises that we make.
Ms. Niemela, thank you. And selfishly, I love that you found your professional home at the University of Denver. That makes me really proud, really, really proud. Mr. Abbas, we've heard a little bit about the needs. Could you speak to the gaps in services?
The gaps in services. Well, it's interesting because we in Colorado are trying to do whatever we can, working together with people like Dan Warvey from the VA, Dana, Judge Shakes, the active duty and things like that, and we're trying to plug those holes. Right now, there are gaps within the community, and there's a lot of people who have great intentions who want to go fill those gaps. I will tell you this, a lot of people don't know what they can do. They don't have to be veterans to help other veterans. And we have this conversation all the time. You know, what we need are people to step up to become peers and also to become mentors. And for most of the people in this room, I think there's a great opportunity for you to become mentors to men and women who have served in the military so that they can successfully transition out of the service and into whatever they're going to do for a career, or if they're going into higher education. If you look at the stats of the people who are coming out of the military right now, about 39% go on and go into higher education. They use your GI Bill benefits, things like that. So that's a big chunk of people that need help. Another 50 some odd percent are going to go straight into careers. So the vast majority are going to go into careers. They could use your help in terms of, telling them what the ropes are, helping them to understand what the industry or the different sector that they're looking to go into, how they can navigate that area. You've got a smaller percentage, probably about 12%, that are either retiring or probably medically retired and not going into careers, or are ending up in the vets court and are really having a hard time and struggling to get back into society. Those people we definitely need peers for, and we need them at every level. Doesn't matter if, and I think Dana brought this up, you've got to be able to do what you say you're going to do. There's a lot of well-intentioned people out there who say, hey, I can do this for you, and then they disappear. I know that some of the men and women who are out here that work with veterans on a day in and day out basis have heard those stories from veterans. Hey, they said they were going to do this, and I haven't heard anything. So what we need is, as a community, if we're going to look at gaps, is serve as peers, serve as mentors, and do what we say we're going to do. And I think Dana hit the nail on the head when she said that, and Judge, you said that as well. These are key things. Our veterans are not looking for a handout. What they're looking for is an opportunity. They'll, if you give them the opportunity, chances are they'll take the ball and they'll run with it. They don't want to have a handout. They do not, I will tell you this, majority of the veterans who end up at the homeless stand-down, they're not happy being there. They're kind of ashamed to be in that position. And I will tell you, a lot of the veterans you see out there that are holding up those signs that say, I'm a homeless veteran, chances are they're not a homeless veteran. There's so many resources out there. There is no reason that any veteran should be homeless, at least here in the city of Denver. But what they're looking for, the veterans that are not holding up the signs, the ones who are really having the problems, they're looking for an opportunity. The VTCs, the Veterans Courts, those are opportunities. It's giving them a chance to move forward, to make something for themselves. And they want to take that chance, that opportunity. Okay? If you look at the veterans who are going to college, most of them are finishing in record time, and they're doing great things with it because they want the opportunity. They recognize they've gotten a fantastic chance to use GI Bill benefits, but then they're going to apply that. They're going to take it and they're going to run with it. I've seen tons of veterans who've made successful transitions, and the business community wants to hire veterans because they bring dependability, they bring adaptability, they're responsible. They do what they say they're going to do. And that is something that has positive repercussions in the business environment. So overall, when we talk about the gaps that are, what gaps do I see in the community? It really is finding peers, mentors, and it doesn't have to be a veteran, for these men and women who are coming out of the service. They're a national asset. And there's something that we should all work with and strive to get into the right spot, because they're going to make our community so much better overall. So I hope I answered the question.
Absolutely. Mr. Abbas, thank you. And adaptability, accountability, I love that these words come up over and over again in each one of the responses. Chief Smart,
if I could, just one thing,
please.
Because I don't think Judge Shakes brought it up. We talk about opportunity, and he's giving them, the vets courts are definitely giving them that opportunity. But if you want to be a little more Machiavellian about this and say, why should I really do this? Why should I support a vet court in my community? There's also, for that side, there's also a big economic impact. There's something like, a $55,000 savings to the community for each person who goes through a VTC versus
$35,000 a year to keep someone in prison in Colorado. We've estimated, the University of Colorado Springs estimate that we save about $500,000 a year between the Department of Corrections and the local sheriff's department in our vet court program in El Paso County.
That right there, that's going to have a certain impact on people who look at issues such as Vets Court, or look what Dana does in terms of getting jobs and housing for people. So again, to be kind of bloodthirsty about it, there's some positive economic impacts of getting these veterans into the right place, and so we can all support that.
You're a pragmatist. He's not bloodthirsty. It's pragmatism.
Thank you.
Chief Samard and Ms. Niemela, would you add anything on the gaps?
One that just came to my attention probably within the last 6 months with regard to homelessness. There's a center in Aurora called the Comitas Crisis Center, where they have homeless services, but they also have dedicated homeless services to veterans. They have about 8 rooms, and they get money from the VA, which is about $43 a day, I think, for those veterans. Today, most of those veterans, especially female veterans, have children or there's family members with them. There is no stipend for those family members. It's just for the veteran. So what Comitas ends up doing is they get about $100,000 a year, I think, for the amount of veterans they serve. but they have to raise or come up with another $300,000 a year through grants and through generous donations just to take care of those family members. So that's a gap that we have identified through the Defense Council again to try to get some awareness in the community, donors, and then get some legislation if we can. And I know Comitis, James Gillespie's the guy that's working that, is working with legislators to see if we can get the law changed to get some additional funds for those family members, because it is a burden, obviously. And the Comitis Crisis Center could eliminate that program altogether and just go with the regular state funding they get for homelessness and get fully funded. But they want to take care of veterans. It's that important to them. James mentioned last week when he was at the Veterans Salute that he had talked to some of those World War II veterans and was talking to them about what he did. And he said quite a few of them broke down when they heard, and they were not aware of, the homelessness problem that we had with veterans, because that was unheard of when they came back. So that's a gap. One, there's many that I think that we need to pay attention to and take care of.
Thank you.
I would add, from my perspective, that when we are addressing the needs, particularly of those most vulnerable in our community, but also in an effort to prevent those who are not currently vulnerable from becoming so, are gaps in behavioral health services. And this is a really, really big deal to me. I'm an individual, I'm a veteran who has received counseling in my adult life no less than 4 times. I'm proud of it. I'm happy to announce it to the world. I will wear it on my sleeve because my mental health is very important to my overall well-being, both at home and on the job. And my counseling has been grief counseling. It's been because of a breakup. It was because I had overworked myself. It was for family therapy. It runs the gamut. Now, I'm a veteran. Do I need somebody who has specific techniques and qualifications to serve veterans to meet my mental health needs? No, I don't. I need somebody who can address grief problems and relationship problems and work-life balance problems. And I think considering the audience of some service providers and some hopeful service providers, that you all come to understand that our unique needs from a behavioral health perspective are not just about combat. And with that said, if somebody were to come to me and need combat trauma-related mental health services or military sexual trauma, the first people I'm going to call is the VA. They're the ones that I trust the most to address the issue, the VA, the vet centers. Aside from that, the things that create homelessness amongst our veterans are not necessarily unique to veterans. They're human issues. They're financial issues. They're family breakup issues. The high prevalence of early childhood trauma is not spoken of enough. I see you nodding over here, Judge Shakes, and I appreciate that because I really think that people are not paying close enough attention to what the family dynamic in early childhood years can do to an individual further down the road, particularly those who then are deployed and experience combat multiple times. So those individuals, those service providers who have competencies in dealing with early childhood trauma, grief and loss, you mentioned survivor's guilt, huge in this community. And then how do we address that with our aging veteran population? And again, I'm going to remind you, I'm not a statistician, I'm a big picture thinker, but a lot of research has come out in the last couple years, particularly around veteran suicide. And it's probably not who you think, and it's probably not why you think. The numbers of deployed versus non-deployed veterans who are committing suicide are comparable. Those aging veterans, you think of my father, who is Vietnam era. I think of my boyfriend's father, who's a combat Vietnam vet. Everything's been fine for 30 years. But now they're facing the fact that their peers are passing away. They're retiring, and they're losing their sense of purpose. Some of those issues might come up again. Some of them may be combat related. Some of them just having a sense of purpose in life. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of mental health practitioners in the community know how to address those needs. So if you give an hour, if you provide voluntary or reduced or sliding scale mental health services in your community, if you're able to adequately communicate your competencies, I think that people will respond to that. I think veterans will respond to that. And the flip side to that story is, in terms of gaps in services, is really a gap in our way of thinking, which is mental health is okay, it's necessary, it's okay to get that kind of help, and to change the dialogue around that, particularly for active duty service members, and then for those of us who get out and wait a very, very long time to receive services, that it's okay to see a counselor. It's okay to talk about your feelings, whether it's about the fact that the economy crashed in 2008 and 2009 and you couldn't pay your rent and things went south and now your finances are a mess and your family fell apart. Certainly that happens to veterans, but it has happened to a lot of folks in our community. And I think that there's a lot of providers out there who are able and hopefully willing to step up to the plate to fill in those gaps.
Ms. Niemela, thank you for making such a brilliant segue into behavioral health. And I want to change the direction of the conversation a little bit to the STERM Military Psychology Concentration and also its affiliated clinic, launching in 2016. Watch this space. Colonel Kent, could you kick us off in a conversation about how, say, Buckley Air Force Base might collaborate with the new STERM Military Psychology Concentration and Clinic?
Certainly, happy to do so. The first thing I want to do is try to pull in some of the pieces that we've already talked about, and I appreciate your comments in particular, Dana. One of the problems that we have, a significant gap, is in having qualified mental health professionals available not just for military and veterans, but for our entire country. We have many people who are trained, but we don't necessarily have people who have the full competencies in evidence-based treatments for key conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injuries, anxiety, the sorts of conditions that Judge Shakes mentioned earlier. So it's certainly valuable to have people who are willing to help, but there's a shortage of people in general. There's a shortage of people who have the specific training to provide the types of treatment that military and veterans need. And I believe things like the Stern Family Foundation's new military psychology program is well positioned to help begin to bridge that gap. Speaking from experience as the chief psychologist of the Air Force, we have a very difficult time finding both willing and qualified people to come into the service to provide care for active duty members. The VA has that same problem in finding qualified people to treat our veteran population. The need extends even further. Within our clinic at Buckley, we can't care for all of the military members and families that we have, so we do refer out to the community for some services, and very often that results in a delay in care or may result in people being seen by folks that do not have the quality of training that they need to provide very effective services. We have provided places for externs from DU to come in the past and practice within our mental health clinic at Buckley. My chief of my mental health clinic, Major Amanda Hardy, is here. If you're interested in coming out and working with us, she'd be happy to talk with you. But we do have, I think particularly with the new program coming on, we're looking to expand that opportunity and help to bridge the gap and make sure that they can get those externs into other placements within the military environment here in Colorado. Those people leave those training programs with experience working within a military environment with military members, and at Buckley they have the opportunity to work with Air Force, Army, Navy, Marine, even Coast Guard individuals, as we have all of those present in large numbers at Buckley. And I think that helps them be better prepared to go out, whether they choose to join the Air Force or to work within the VA system, or simply be in some sort of private or community practice where they open their doors and make themselves available to military members, veterans, and their families. So I think working with both Buckley and with other military organizations, I do think that this program has a great opportunity to expand that capacity.
Colonel Kent, thank you. And you said it was Chief Hardy?
Major Amanda Hardy is out there. And for those who are interested, we do
Major
have
Hardy, you should give yourself a little wave so that all the trainees, nice, okay, you'll literally be inundated by the end of the
And for
panel.
those who are interested, on a shameless plug here, we do have a contract psychologist position opening at the end of the month. So if there are any, you're not quite willing to put the uniform on yet, but you would like to work full-time with military and veterans, we can make that happen for you at Buckley.
That's so great. And thank you for the role you play in training our students across all of the DU programs. And I'm so excited that we get to do more to collaborate in that way.
Yes.
Chief Samard, from your perspective on the city and policy capacity.
Well, I'm kind of in a unique position because I've been asked to serve on the Board of Friends for the GSSP-PPE, so I appreciate that opportunity to do that. And I think that the military psychology program has great promise and potential to fill those gaps that we've been talking about today, both supporting veterans on campus for DU, but also in the community where there's a need also. I hope to help, again, working with Colonel Kent and the folks at Buckley to raise awareness, share contacts again. You know, the Defense Council that I keep talking about, but that's a great nucleus of folks to help out. And I think in recruiting, I think it's really important, we talked about a little bit today, is, you know, veterans, helping veterans, trying to get veterans and family members and military members into these programs to be students so they can go out because they want to make a difference and they want to help. And to be quite honest with you, I spent 5 years at the Community College of Aurora as the director of academic advising there, so I worked with a lot of veterans also too. A lot of the times veterans are more comfortable talking to veterans, so if they know that they have somebody sitting across the table or the desk from them that has some experience, sometimes that's a level of comfort that they need. So I think it's important that we look to recruit those type of folks into the program. They may need some help. I know the GI Bill covers a portion of the tuition, may not cover all of the tuition for the program, so additional scholarships that can help. It doesn't. Dana knows it doesn't. I went to University College, it did, so I got my master's at University College, so it was great, but it doesn't. So that's something that we can help with too, with additional scholarships for those types of veterans that want to get involved and help make a difference.
Excellent, thank you. And Judge Shakes, you had a few other thoughts on where to chart a course before we turn it over to my co-moderator, Ms. Sarah Stowell.
A few things. We've sort of described the lay of the land and identified needs and gaps. What I'd like to do in just a couple minutes here is look beyond the horizon and throw out some ideas that you all may want to take back to your agencies or organizations about things we can do in the future. The first is, right now, the Veterans Court in Colorado are a front range activity. Pueblo to Denver, Colorado Springs. We don't have veterans courts in Grand Junction or Craig or Sterling. And I bring that up because in these last two wars, unlike Vietnam, we've relied heavily on the National Guard and Reserve. So the soldiers that come back from a deployment at Fort Carson have wonderful resources at Fort Carson. That same unit that's a National Guard unit or an Army Reserve unit goes back to Craig or Sterling or Durango, and they go back into their community. And they don't have the experienced clinicians, they don't have law enforcement, they don't have a chain of command that's watching out for them. So some thought as to how we might project the Veterans Court activities around the state, either by some sort of a remote telecommunication, perhaps having veterans courts in the smaller communities, but that's an idea for the future. On the law side, we've got some work to do. Right now, the veterans courts are mostly plead guilty and then get a deferred sentence or a break on your probation. It would be great if we had more opportunities for veterans to be completely diverted in a pre-charge diversion program where veterans are in trouble don't ever get charged, so there never is a record. And we don't have to worry about trying to seal that record. So that's something that we in the legal system, I think, can look to. With regard to the military psychology program at DU, I think there are two things that would be very helpful, and that is creating educational modules so that we in the criminal justice system understand better PTSD, how PTSD relates to criminal conduct, those kinds of things. And then some help with regard to key principles of behavior modification. All the therapeutic jurisprudence courts are focused on behavior modification, and that's not something that we in the criminal justice system know a whole lot about. Just about everybody else here on the podium knows more about that than I do. And certainly military psychology, veterans courts, and finding those things that can be great incentives for veterans. And then finally, then collecting evidence-based practices. There are a lot of people that want to help veterans, and I've had offers for fishing therapy. And I thought, well, that's a nice activity, but is it really therapy? I've had offers for equine therapy and laughed at it only to find out it is an evidence-based practice. So we need some help in cutting through all the good people that want to help veterans and all the people that want to help with actual evidence-based practices that have some basis in the science of psychology that can help us out. Then the final thing I'd like to throw out is this, and that is, wouldn't it be great if we could prevent people from getting PTSD? What's the research out there that can help us understand what we could do to prevent this occurrence? We know, as Dana mentioned, that the folks that have adverse child experiences are more susceptible to PTSD, but is there some way that we could prevent this problem from happening in the first place? The final thought I want to leave you, so that's a great area, I think, for research at the PhD level and neuropsychology and neuropsychologists doing those kinds of things. The final thing I want to leave you with is this, and that is we serve with our veterans an extraordinary population. For the young men and women that in the last decade have signed up to join the military, they had a pretty good idea they were going to go to combat, particularly the soldiers and Marines. And all the folks in Veterans Court, all the veterans have in them a seed of success that I don't see on my regular criminal docket. On my regular criminal docket, I see people that frankly, there's not much we can do. But the veterans, however, have all at one point stood on a parade field and graduated from basic training. Think about how few people in our country have done that. And then, at least in our Veterans Court, 94% have served in combat. How few people have honorably served in combat, honorably. That's a tiny, tiny population. But that indicates to me that all these folks, although they may be in trouble right now, they may be in the criminal justice system, out of a job or homeless, they have within them, unlike many people in our criminal docket, a seed for success. And that causes me to be very optimistic about the population that we serve.
Excellent. Judge Shakes, thank you. Speaking of being optimistic about the future, I would like to introduce my co-moderator, Ms. Sarah Stoll, who's the future of mental health, and she's going to talk about cultural competence.
Thank you, and thank you for all the work that you're doing as a veteran. It's personal, and I am grateful, but also as a future social worker, it is also the profession that I'm entering into. And you've done a great job of actually answering the questions that I've already formulated, but I really want to hit home this cultural competency piece. And due to the collaborative, cohesive nature of the military, it is well known that service members are more comfortable talking to and processing their experiences with other military or former military members. In light of this, what can we do to ensure actionable steps are taken for cultural competency and making it a priority for civilian clinicians? Izzy?
So I think one thing I'd like to say about the cultural competency, first of all, I think it comes down to when we're looking at helping veterans, and you've got a veteran who wants to help, and you've got a non-veteran who wants to help. I look at it like a hurdle race. The veteran doesn't have to run or jump over about 4 or 5 hurdles just because they are a veteran. They've got that background and that common language that they can speak with the veteran or the service member who needs help. But it is something that the non-veteran can learn over, and it just takes some competency, some understanding of military culture. What's the difference between a soldier and a Marine? You know, what does the Air Force do versus the Navy pilots? What happens, you know, what's an NCO? What's an officer? Things like that. Those are just some basic things that can be taught, and be taught through a cultural sensitivity class, to give people an understanding of what's going on. I know that when I ran the Boots of Suits program at the University of Colorado, Denver, I had a few business people who would say, "Hey, Izzy, what should I say to a veteran?" I'd look at them kind of puzzled and say, "Well, I usually start with, 'Hi, my name is,' and go from there." That's a thing that I think that as we talk about cultural sensitivity, the big thing is, let's all not be afraid to talk to a veteran. We're not all Rambo. We're not all John Wayne from the Green Berets. Yeah, except for the colonel here. You know, we are just like America. We are a cross-section of the United States. You know, we come from poor backgrounds and rich backgrounds. We come from households that were, you know, had low education and high education. So we're just normal people. Talk to us. And I think that's the big first step that you can take with that cultural competency is, you know, don't be afraid to talk to a veteran. I would say don't ask them how many people they've killed or anything like that, but I think most of you already know that, or you wouldn't be here at this type of a program. But you talk to them like they're a normal person. It's my favorite thing to go up to somebody I see a veteran in a wheelchair, and I'll go up, "Hey, don't get up. It's okay." They like it when to treat them like a normal person. So treat them normally, and I think that goes a long way to cultural competency.
Just a couple of things. One of my first steps of cultural competency, everybody I think has jokes in this area, is that we are not all soldiers. The easiest way to make a... No, I'm an airman. You're a sailor. Chief and I are airmen. We have some soldiers here on the stage, but the way to really make a Marine mad is to call them a soldier. That's a bad first step of cultural competence. And the next step is not to assume that everyone's experience is the same. An infantryman's experience as a military member is very different than a cyber warrior in the Air Force's experience. We get lots of jokes about us being the chair force and our deployments are so grueling. And the services are very different, and even within the services, the specific career field cultures can be very different. So the goal should not be to try to know everyone's culture, but to be aware of what some of the common experiences are, some of the training experiences people may have had. And as the judge did a beautiful job of representing, the strengths that those service members bring with them when they're coming into any kind of therapy session. The final thing that I would say is that more important to me than cultural competency and understanding the military is professional competency, whether you are a lawyer or a psychologist or a social worker, psychiatrist, that you are proficient in your profession and that you expand from there into understanding what a military member or a veteran may need from you from that point on. I would much rather send one of my airmen to see a very, very competent psychologist than an incompetent psychologist that happens to know a lot about the military. Those are the skills that we need, and that I hope these types of events and the new military psychology program at DU will help expand and increase for our community.
This panel,
Okay.
this audience, this fab venue, this conversation, this is where it's at. I want everybody to join me in thanking this extraordinary group of panelists, my co-moderator, our generous sponsors, our community partners, our chancellor, the University of Denver, all of the agencies represented here. Please consider donating to support any of the programs listed in your program today. All of them support our veterans programming. A lot of them support also scholarships. I know Chief Samard mentioned that. Please consider doing that on the way out. Please also stay for a bite and a toast with our panelists. And with that, I want to thank you all, and thanks to our veterans.